On this episode of the WildFed podcast.
A hare and a rabbit, they are closely related. Rabbits are born no hair, they're pink, they're blind, they're helpless. Hares are born, they're just like fully formed.
Sometimes they're running across a very narrow gap fast, so you have a split second. I was ready, and one still blew by me, and I couldn't believe how fast.
It's not like we have a GPS on the hare itself, but we do on the dogs. And so some of these runs were 6 or 7 miles before we actually got a shot.
Well, that rabbit took, when I was braising it down, twice as long as all the other ones.
I'm sure you've cooked plenty of rabbit in your time.
We did a quail and rabbit sausage, a rabbit ragu. I opted to just separate the loins out, lay them on a flat sheet of prosciutto, rolled that up, tied it, seared it, sliced it.
Nature is what's feeding people now, so you can have nature and eat it too. Which wild foods could be brought to the forefront?
I think that's kind of what we have to do, is know when we've got too much of one thing, figure out how to utilize it, and get it to market.
Episode 168 of the WildFed podcast, Allergic to Hare, with Tony Seichrist, is brought to you by Surthrival. Man, I'm excited to introduce a new product at surthrival.com. We've teamed up with Hammond's Black Walnuts, and after a year of behind-the-scenes work, I'm proud to finally introduce Surthrival's Black Walnut Protein Powder. This is the most exciting new product I've seen in my 15 years in the health food and nutritional supplement industry. I've been using it for over 6 months every morning in my smoothie and loving it more each day. It fortifies my blended drinks with 17 grams of Wyld protein per scoop. But the story is even more incredible because the black walnuts in our protein powder are hand foraged from wild native trees. There's no fertilizer, no irrigation, no pesticides used anywhere in the process. No agricultural land is used either, so no habitat is disrupted to produce these nuts. All the foragers are volunteers paid by the pound for their harvests. In other words, when you invest in Surthrival's Black Walnut Protein Powder, it's not just an investment in your health. You're investing in wild lands, wild species, healthy ecosystems, and the people who tend to them. I can honestly say it's hands down the most ethically sourced and produced protein product ever made. It's also the cleanest because we use the same ultra-pure CO2 extraction process used in high-end cannabis extracts. This yields a light-colored raw protein powder far superior to the ones made with higher heat expeller pressing. It's a very fine flour too, so we've used it in more than just smoothies. My wife's been baking it into cookies and muffins, turning them into wild protein fortified snacks, and she uses it in her oatmeal at breakfast too. I'm excited to see all the recipes you come up with using this really versatile ingredient. Wild North American native trees, 100% grown and processed in the USA. Sometimes it feels too good to be true. We've managed to bring a wild, hand-foraged, native North American food to people in a format they can easily use to fortify their diets daily. Head over to surthrival.com to check out the entire product line and use the coupon code WildFed to get an additional 5% off your order. Surthrival's Black Walnut Protein Powder, the first wild protein powder on the market ever. Do you need an antidote to the metaverse? We just launched our newest t-shirt design over at wild-fed.com. It features our antidote to the metaverse tagline on the chest, a WildFed badge on the sleeve, and 2 tarot-style cards juxtaposed on the back, one modeled on the tarot card known as the Fool, who's wearing an Oculus and absent-mindedly walking off the roof of a building with a bag of fast food in one hand and a cell phone in the other. Next to it is a card based on the Magician, who's juggling 4 implements, a fishing rod, a rifle, a trap, and a foraging basket. It represents our belief that a life that includes the outdoors inoculates you against believing that an artificial experience of life could ever replace a natural one. You see, for us, being wild-fed, hunting, fishing, and foraging is about a lot more than just getting our groceries. It's an antidote to the metaverse, an act of rebellion against the transhuman agenda that is leading humanity to abandon the natural world in favor of wearing screens over their eyes to live in a virtual one. We choose the natural over the artificial. We choose an antidote to the metaverse. We choose to be fed by the wild. Check out our new shirt at wild-fed.com. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. Today's episode's with my good friend Tony Seichrist. I first met Tony at his restaurant, the Wyld in Savannah, Georgia, where he cooked Alligator for season 1 of WildFed. Since then, he's been featured in 2 episodes of season 2, and he was just with us for an episode of season 3, making him our most frequent guest on the WildFed TV show. Tony's one of my favorite people. Just last week, I picked him up at the airport and we drove nearly 4 hours engaged in constant conversation. I just love talking with this guy, and he and I never seem to run out of topics to bat around. We share a lot of ideas, opinions, and stances on things, yet I think we both help one another to think in new and fresh ways too. He's one of those friends that inspires me to strive to do more and be better. He's also an incredible chef and a passionate foodie, though he'd probably hate being called anything that clichè, so maybe epicurean would be better. Every time I'm around him, I learn something new about food, whether it's sourcing, cutting, or cooking. His experience working with food is tremendous. We recorded this early in the morning before heading back to the airport just after a 3-day snowshoe hare hunt. Our hunt was great, but our visit was far too short. So Tony, I'm looking forward to our next session.
And we are back. It's been 3 weeks of vacation time. I got Tony Seichrist here in Maine with me. How you doing, Tony?
Very well. Thank you for having me.
Frequent guest of the show.
Happy to be a frequent guest.
Most visited guest of the WildFed TV show. I think 4th episode we just filmed.
That sounds right.
Right? Because we did Gator. It was the first episode. Yep. And that's the first episode we ever filmed. It wasn't the first one to air, but it was the first one we ever filmed. So you were the inaugural episode?
I'm honored. Thank you.
Oh, we're honored, man. But last night was awesome because it was like the first time you really got to cook like how you cook rather than trying to work around.
Yeah. It was nice, actually. This one was pretty easy. I mean, not easy, but it was simpler to adjust to a wild hare than a python.
Yeah.
So it was a shorter bridge.
To a gnarly python, too.
Yeah, it really was.
So, well, welcome to Maine, too. I know you've been up here.
Yep, love Maine.
Yeah, I know you've been up here before, but welcome to Maine winter.
Yeah, that was first. Excuse me. Yeah, that was a first. Not horribly cold, but I think I timed it pretty well. I got pretty lucky.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And background for the listeners, the last time you were going to come up, because we had planned this hare hunt for probably, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago?
Something like that, yeah.
And you came up, and I called you in the airport about 6 a.m. to
was in
say
TSA.
I had COVID.
Yeah,
you'd already checked your bag, so you ended up in Portland for a day, even though you didn't get to connect with us.
I had a great time. Portland is my favorite food town of all time. I ate at 5 restaurants in one day. Yeah. And by the time I was finished, it was hard to walk, but it was totally worth it.
For people who don't know you, just maybe a little background on what you do, just so that people get context of why you're hopping around all these restaurants.
Sure. I'm chef owner of the Wyld Dock Bar in Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah. And so, awesome restaurant, amazing chef, great background too.
Thank you.
I think,
Thank you.
As a chef. And so, you hit up all those restaurants. Portland's got such a good food
It's
scene.
incredible. Like, it blows my mind. For such a small city, it's just awesome.
Yeah, and there's so many places I wish I could take you in. Many good restaurants that are just sort of outside the city, too, in some of the surrounding towns. But I know it's too short of a trip, it feels like.
Yeah, but it was like, even one day was enough. Like, if you really hustle, you can make it happen.
Which you did. So, that's really cool.
It was fun.
Yeah, and then, of course, we just had our hare hunt with Hunt East Adventures. Mike and Dennis were
big shout out to those guys. They were fantastic.
They really were.
Took really good care of us, put us on a lot of rabbits, and the food was kind of unbelievably good. Yeah. They did an amazing job.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you mean the lunches that he was cooking?
Lunches they were cooking. They killed it.
Yeah, that was great. So off the tailgate, he had like a Coleman stove probably or something like that.
Little camp griddle thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and he cooked us deer and moose every day, which was just great.
Hot meals.
Fajitas. And what else did we do?
We had a Philly cheesesteak kind of thing the first day.
Yeah.
And moose chili the last day. And it was amazing.
And so that part of Maine we were in, we call Down East, which everybody's heard of, but many people don't really know quite what it means. And it actually means to go northeast along the coast.
It's very confusing for someone from Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it does have to do with winds, I guess. So that was traveling downwind for the cod boats, I guess. But we're almost to the New Brunswick border. So, people are like, when I tell people around the country that I'm from Maine, I get almost this universal. I feel like they respond the way I would respond if somebody told me they were from Alaska.
Right.
I'd be like, oh, well, Alaska. Like, wow.
Right.
When people are like, oh, Maine. It's like, well, I mean, I can drive to Boston in 2 hours.
Sure.
Not that, it doesn't feel that remote to me. But when we go to a place like Machias, it feels remote because we drove almost 4 hours to get there.
Yep.
And now you're out there, man. I mean, finding a place to eat at night or anything like that.
Closer to Canada than Portland, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But that was really cool to go all the way up there and then work with the beagles. Huh?
Yeah, and it's a different landscape from anywhere I'd been in Maine before. These giant blueberry fields that I guess have been cut after the season, and they're kind of like bright red after they cut them. Yeah, that was really cool, and
acres.
It was amazing. It was huge. Yeah. But yeah, I had a blast. Really fun.
Me too.
The dogs were pretty incredible.
Yeah, little beagles. So we hunted really behind, what, 3 of them typically? I think we brought 4 to 5, but we'd hunt 3 at a time.
I think at one point we had 4, but 3 was average. Yeah.
Yeah. And that strategy of hunting behind, that was my first time hunting behind beagles. So
Me too.
Those of you who are familiar, sorry for the review here, but for folks who aren't familiar, so you got these little beagles, very small hounds, and we're running on the snow, but of course the season does start before the snow. Right. But the snowshoe hares... I guess having hunted bears behind dogs, in front of dogs, I don't know what I expected, but I thought maybe they would be closer to the hare than they were. Yeah. They're not crazy fast dogs.
No, but I guess maybe that's the point.
Yeah. Well, it makes a lot of sense if you're going to be shooting shotgun in front of them. But yeah, they would be just sort of finding the rabbit tracks and pushing the rabbit, or the hare, I should say, and he'd be like circumscribing like a giant circle over and over that was made of little circles as he'd run.
And very accurate circles. Like we actually got to look at the, as you know, obviously, we got to look at the GPS and see, exactly where that dog was going. Those dogs were going each time. And there were these really like neat circles.
Tight circles.
Occasionally they'd veer off in a strange direction, but like, the majority of the time they were really kind of patterned in.
Yeah. My understanding is they don't like to leave their territory, so they'll just keep working circles. Because what we seemed to be doing was the guides would take us to where they predicted the dogs were, the direction they thought not just the dog, but the direction they thought the hare would be out in front of them. Yeah. And trying to be there to intercept it, which is sort of a needle in a haystack in that thick spruce growth and everything. So we'd end up in these spots. And the first day it was like, wait, what are we doing?
Yeah, I didn't really get it. It took me, till about the middle of the second day. I was like, oh, okay, I see what he's doing.
By the end of the third day, I knew exactly what we were doing, right? You start having your own ideas about where you should be and all these kind of things. But, and then we were shooting 12-gauge shotguns, of course, number 7 shot. I felt like, it's a very effective strategy for taking the rabbits. Man, it does some damage to them, huh?
Yeah, I'd probably go with a 28 or a 20 next time. Yeah. That seems more appropriate.
It's a bummer that that pellet spread at that distance, you're going to get gut hits. You're getting hits into the thighs, the good meat. And, except for when they would pop up sometimes, because typically they're running by, so you're trying to take like a running shot. Yeah. Hopefully they're running kind of towards you, which means you don't have to lead them or anything.
Well, and sometimes they're running across a very narrow gap. Fast. So you have a split second. I was, they would tell you, get up, get ready, go ahead and get your aim point down. And when you see that, then, shoot. I was ready, and one still blew by me, and I couldn't believe how fast.
Yeah, your brain has to process. Plus, there's dogs on the ground, so you
that's true.
You got to go through that sort of discrimination process as you determine if it's really the, and you just sort of see this like white silvery flash. Yeah, and then it's like by the time you process, you gotta be ready. The best is when they would pop up and kind of almost see you and pause for a second, and then you could get a kind of a cleaner type headshot type shot, but. I guess we should tell the story of what happened to me, too, which is...
Yeah, that was weird.
Pretty bizarre. Weird. That first morning, we got out there, and the first one that came in, because we broke into 2 groups. So you were a separate group, and I was with Grant. You were with Christian filming. And that first hare that came in, it was like picture perfect. I didn't know at the time, being my first one, but... It just came running straight towards us. Everything went perfect. It had to have been like 10 minutes into the...
Oh, it was quick.
It was like right away, right?
Yeah, it was quick. It was right away.
Comes in, I get this great shot. It goes perfect. Knock this hare down. And then I go over to pick it up. And Grant's filming, so it's like sort of... We like to try to get these beautiful shots, If I can get my hands on the animal, rather than doing the like grip and grin, we like to kind of do like these... We call them the beauty shots to show how beautiful the animal is. And... It doesn't take more than a couple of minutes, and I'm starting to feel itchy throat, itchy eyes, and you know that thing you sometimes do when you're starting to feel an allergy, and you know you shouldn't, but you just want to like crank on your eye sometimes, and it itches. And my eye's starting to swell, and Grant's starting to look at me like, hey, you're looking a little red. And then I see Mike's thinking, oh, that looks kind of bad. But we must have hunted another hour or so.
Yeah, and I didn't know anything was going on. And we finally met up at one point, and I think you had your... I didn't see it at first. Like, I saw your good eye at first, and then all of a sudden you turned, and it was like, whoa. What? And I think you saw the look on my face, which was, oh, my God. You know, like, why is he making that, like, horrible face at me? Then we got you back to the truck, and you looked in the mirror, and I think it actually started getting worse when we were back at the truck. Like, from the time we met back up to the time we got to the truck was about, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I was still on the climb up the inflammation ladder there.
You were still going up. Yeah, 100%. But, yeah, it was a little scary. Yeah. Be that far out, and... You know.
And it looked kind of like, you know, boxing, like post-fight kind of swollen eye.
Yeah.
In fact, I was starting to, there was no issue with my actual vision, but just with my eye closing and stuff around it. So everything, I actually wasn't too freaked out by that. I was a little wheezy, and I had all those kind of symptoms, but I've ridden up to the edge of anaphylaxis a few times, so it didn't freak me out. Yeah, I'm like, I'm okay in that territory. I didn't feel like it was going to actually like start to occlude my breathing or anything.
Right.
But when I opened my eye manually with my hand and saw my eyeball was actually swelling, and the whites of my eye were starting to overtake my cornea.
I didn't know that was possible.
I didn't either, and it looked gross. Everybody was calling it my eye jelly.
Yeah.
So first day, we just, you know, once I saw my eye jelly sort of starting to cover my iris, I was like, I'm going to the hospital.
Yeah.
Not messing around with my eye.
Yeah.
So we had to cut the hunt short that day. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that was weird, man. What a story. So, a little Benadryl.
A little bit of time. Yeah.
But the ER, that was the other interesting thing. They just had a sign straight up saying the quiet part out loud. It was like, due to COVID vaccine mandates, we're short-staffed, which is like a way of saying all of the medically trained people here didn't want this vaccine and left their jobs over it.
And it wasn't really crowded. There was, you know, I don't know, 3 people waiting for, you know, waiting to go back. But I don't know that I saw anybody actually make it in the back.
No, I know. And after two hours in there, they were like...
Yeah, you gave up.
I went up to the front and they were really nice about it. I said, hey, man, I'm just this is getting too late. I got to go.
Well, and your eye was coming back down by that
everything
point,
was looking good. But they did it was cool. She came out and did like a little rapid check before I left. She made sure I was okay. And but anyway, so that was day 1.
Yeah, that was... right. And day 2 was a little chillier. Yeah. But not bad.
Yeah. You came up with that thick-ass parka.
I know.
I brought a massive parka, too, so I'm not making fun of it.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one, but, most of the time it was too hot.
Yeah, because I'd
rather be there than too cold.
The days just before you got, like, the actual days. Because I rolled in from Hawaii, so I was in Kauai. Grant was in Thailand.
Right.
We come rolling back from our vacations, and it's like the coldest days of the year. It's like minus 20.
Well, and the wind chill was like, negative 100. Yeah. Like, I didn't know that was possible.
It was pretty cold. 2 days of that, and then I'm looking at because you wrote, you're like, should I be concerned about this? Yeah. And I look at the weather, and it's like the day you're rolling in, it's like back to 30 degrees.
Yeah, that was a big change.
Massive swing, because I was thinking
I almost didn't believe it,
20 to 30 is 50-degree swing.
That's a lot. And I kind of didn't believe it. I was like, there's no way. It's still going to be freezing, and I'm going to be, human ice cube.
Right. So,
it was great.
Taking a 3-hour drive, you're like, I better bring everything I might need.
Yeah.
So we get up there, and then I realize, like, I don't really have the warm
clothes.
Like overdressed. Yeah. I don't have warm weather clothes.
Yeah.
But anyway, we made it work.
It was great.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It was a good time. I'm trying to think what else did we do?
Antics?
Yeah, antics.
What other antics were there? I don't know. We lost Grant at one point.
That was fun.
Filming with the drone. They lost us. Yeah, there were some antics, but anyway,
pretty smooth.
Overall good time.
Yeah, it was smooth.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what you did with the Hare, the snowshoe hare.
Sure.
Yeah, and actually, maybe I'll just say a piece about hares, too, because I've got these fun facts in my mind from doing the show. But so a hare and a rabbit, I think that's kind of the question, like, what's the difference? And so here's for you guys listening, if you're not familiar, they are closely related. But hares are the same genus as jackrabbits, which makes sense when you look at them, right?
Absolutely.
They got the taller ears. They got a kind of a taller stance.
Longer.
Yeah. Different body
bigger.
shape, right? They do look like a northern jackrabbit, and they are. So the genus is Lepus, and the snowshoe hare is Lepus americanus. I think the
meat is much redder. I was really surprised about that.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah,
not like a deep like ruby red, but a real bright.
Yep.
You know, it was pretty colorful.
Yeah, not really like a white meat.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I think that the jackrabbit is Lepus californicus or something like that. So versus up here, I guess we would have our cottontail rabbits or whatever. So different animal. But the neat thing is that rabbits are born completely differently. So they got like no hair. They're pink. They're blind. They're helpless. And the hares are born. They're leverets. They're called. They're born just like fully formed.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's really neat because they're clearly related animals.
Absolutely.
You see how similar they are, and yet
that's a big difference.
That's a radical difference, right? Yeah. 8 weeks of needing your parents to care for you versus being ready to go in an hour.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Pretty wild, yeah. But anyway, approaching it, I'm sure you've cooked plenty of rabbit in your time.
A lot of rabbit. We have it on the menu at the Wyld most of the time. It's usually, kind of a mild, it's a blank canvas. So you can kind of do whatever you want with it. Not a lot of fat. And this was similar, much more red than I expected, but I didn't find it to be so different that I couldn't apply directly the same kind of techniques. So we did 3 dishes. We did a version of our quail and rabbit sausage. We did the northern version, which was partridge, hare, a little bit of pork, then garlic and white wine and chili flake and all that good stuff. Some breadcrumbs, and then we smear it on a crostini and sear it and finish it in the oven.
Yeah, that was cool how you did that because you put the cast iron in the oven, so that was good and hot.
Yeah, it was a space issue. You could
that's why you did it that way.
Yeah.
You could do it right on the stove.
Keep it hot,
of course.
Keep swapping them in. So,
well, you actually cooked this. You've got it on that toasted crostini,
correct?
Which you put face down, sausage side down.
Correct.
Cook the sausage while it's actually attached to the crostini.
Yep.
Because I would have thought to cook it like a patty, set it on the crostini. So
it doesn't stick.
Yeah.
You got to put it on there raw, and then it kind of cooks into place.
Yeah. Very cool. So that was great.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And then we served that with a little bit of mustard, just a little quick dip.
And I want to go back and just say, with that, was the breadcrumbs were in that?
There's a bit of breadcrumbs mixed in.
I like how you made the breadcrumbs in the meat grinder. That was just a cool trick.
So actually, and not that any of them are listening, but like a lot of my cooks, they really hate having to set up the meat grinder just to make breadcrumbs. But it's it's a small thing, but it has a ton of impact. You get a much better crumb. It's way more consistent. You don't get any of those big, like crusty pieces that never want to seem to break down. And then you get all that powder, the super fine, stuff that's really kind of unusable as well. So this is a really great way to do it out there. For those of you making breadcrumbs. Yeah. And we use our old croutons. So most of the time there's some garlic and thyme on there, and it kind of adds that other layer.
Yeah.
So we did that, and obviously if you're gonna, while you're making, anytime you're putting breadcrumbs into meat, whether it's like a meatloaf or, what we did today, you kind of want to add a little bit of moisture to them. You can soak them in milk, stuff like that. Depending on when you add them to the mix, they'll start absorbing water. So if you put a bunch of dry stuff in and you mix it up, they'll tend to start leaching, and sucking that water out of the mix. So I usually, do white wine over the top and kind of skip a step and mix them together.
White wine over the top of the breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But then mix it in immediately.
Yeah.
But, soaking them in milk, then wringing them out is more of a foolproof way of doing it.
Okay.
So but that's definitely, that's a hot tip.
I like that.
Meat grinder.
And then, so we did that dish. What else did we do?
What else did we do? We did a pasta dish,
which was awesome to see.
So I make a lot of pasta at home, and it's something that I've been doing a fair amount of most of my career. So found some great egg yolks, flour, a little bit of salt. That's pretty much it. And then there's some kneading involved. But
I want to touch on that too, because and you've got, of course, some significant part of your chef training took place in Italy.
Yep.
So as somebody who I kind of got onto the what's very popular now, the sort of like gluten-free, hate on grains approach.
Yep.
I got into that when I was pretty young, because I'm 44 and I remember trying to give up bread.
Yeah.
The bread was actually the hardest.
That's a tough one.
Hardest one for me of everything I've ever quit doing, which includes several fairly addictive plant-based substances over the years. That was one of the hardest things because it's not just a craving, but it's like a foundational cultural phenomenon too.
Yeah. It's in you use it to eat lots of things.
Exactly. And we have like sayings like the staff of life and daily bread and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I have, it's not like I love carbs, it's not like I don't eat carbs, but I have, my diet's not based around bread and wheat products really. So, I guess I just haven't thought about pasta in a long time. And I never really made the distinction between like dry semolina pasta. I guess what you were describing is more like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like northern Italy and southern Italy pastas.
Yeah, generally speaking,
could you
there's a difference.
Explain all that to people.
Yeah. So classically, the northern part of Italy was where more of the financial center was. It was just a wealthier, even way back, it was just a wealthier part of Italy. The south was poorer, less dairy, less eggs, milk, cheese, all of those things. That's more of a northern thing. Obviously, they have some of that down south, but it was a sign of wealth to be able to use nothing but egg yolks as your liquid binder for your flour. So it's a rich dish, right? Like that. Yeah. You can make it with water and flour, and it's still very good. But this is kind of its own thing. My favorite pasta recipe from when I was over there, I brought one back, and I use it almost exclusively. There are times when I do other stuff, obviously, but for the day in day out fresh pasta, like that's what I'm using. I forget exactly what my measurement was. I had to eyeball a little bit, and it was 27 egg yolks or something for like a pound and a third of flour.
Okay, and you ended up with
roughly,
that ball of dough that was like like just the color of egg yolk almost.
Yep. You want it as bright as possible.
So beautiful. Yep. And then you just rolled that out and hand cut it, and that was just cool to watch, man.
Well, I'm glad.
So to me, because for me, just from a nutritional perspective, I just have always been an egg yolk lover. And when people hate on egg yolks, I think, what foolishness. I mean, this is like a food that creatures all through the wild are trying to get at. And the idea that your cholesterol is because of your egg yolks is like, oh my God, give me a break.
Yeah, it's a superfood.
Yeah, it's a superfood. Yeah. And if I had to pick, like when I see people eating like, I'll just have the whites, I'm like, ugh.
I know. What a waste.
Yeah, what a waste. I'm all about getting those yolks. Yeah. And the brighter those yolks, the more, I know that they can color them a bit, but I mostly associate that with really good, deep nutrition, particularly fat-soluble vitamins and things like that. Yeah. So the idea of a pasta that's made with that, I was like, oh boy, I was excited to eat it.
Yeah.
So it was really, that was a treat for me.
Well, I'm glad. And then for that, for the sauce for that, we did a rabbit ragu, and that I've been making versions of this with duck, goose, rabbit. It's all kind of in my regular rotation.
What does ragu actually like really refer to?
It's just like a slow cooking down process. I mean, a lot of it's done with sometimes ground meat. It's traditionally you're going to hear that used with a meat sauce, but that's not exclusive. People are you'll hear like a white bean ragu from time to time or whatever. But what we basically did for that is we started our basic pasta sauce. And then in another pot, because these hares are a little tougher, I think everybody would probably agree with that. They're a little tougher than a regular rabbit.
Oh, yeah. We should touch on that in a little bit. I'll let you finish this thought first.
So I wanted to get those cooked down a little bit on their own so I could, really calibrate and dial it in. And then when it's ready to be pulled, we just pulled it off the bone and added it back to the tomato sauce and then started cooking that to give it its last finish in the sauce. And I think it turned out really well.
I loved it. Yeah.
It was very similar to the rabbit ragu I make with farmed rabbits. So that was a really easy jump. I was expecting a little more of a challenge, but it was like a very simple. Really nothing was all that different. So.
When you think about what you'd have for like a farmed rabbit, you'd have all these rabbits of this, with a similar diet. They'd be eating the same food. They'd be living the same conditions. They're probably not getting a huge amount of exercise.
Yep. Which honestly makes them more tender.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like so you would have consistency of product.
Sure,
too. Like so
absolutely.
You order a dozen rabbits and they're probably all gonna be just about uniform.
Yep.
Like fungible almost.
Well, yep.
But then when you run a rabbit for 7 miles.
Yeah.
I mean, because some of these. We don't really, it's not like we have a GPS on the hare itself, but we do on the dogs.
Yeah.
And so some of these runs were 6 or 7 miles total volume of running before we actually got a shot. So I would imagine if you were going to eat my legs.
Well, that rabbit took, that particular one, when I was braising it down, it took at least twice as long as all the other ones.
We'll get right back to the show in a moment, but first, I'm proud and excited to share that WildFed Season 3 is now airing on Outdoor Channel Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. Eastern as part of their Taste of the Wild block. This is our biggest and best season yet, with adventures ranging from coastal Maine all the way to tropical Hawaii. You'll see familiar faces and meet new friends that are dedicated to the pursuit of wild foods. Come along with me for prairie dog hunting in the Dakotas, the iconic Alewife Run in Maine, gathering and feasting with the foraging world's most renowned expert Sam Thayer, invasive species hunting on the rugged island of Molokai, and my wife Avani's first hunt too. If you don't have access to the Outdoor Channel on cable, you can watch it live right along with us on Friendly TV. That's FRNDLY TV.com. They have a 7-day free trial, and the monthly cost is just $6.99 a month. We can't wait to share all these new stories with you. Thank you so much for your incredible support. Now, back to the show.
I can remember you're pulling meat apart, like, it's just peeling off the bone and shredding down in your fingers. And then you're like, go grab that piece. And I go touch it, and it's like a rubber ball still.
Yeah, it was crazy. I've actually never seen that before. That was a new one for me.
I think about what my legs are like after a 7-mile run. All the lactate, they're sore and stiff. And so,
Well, you're a little bit bigger than a rabbit, too.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's probably more extreme.
Wow. Yeah. And, I also imagine a rabbit to... and they're often depicted like this when they're anthropomorphized, as like with a nervous, rapid heart rate, like because they're on the lookout all the time for the endless predators. The defenses of a rabbit are so actually kind of pathetic. Like they went down.
They're not great.
Yeah, they've definitely gone down an evolutionary road that they can't turn back from. That took them towards a kind of physical innocence. Yeah, because they just don't have it. One that I shot, I hit. In the legs first. The first shot I took, mostly took his legs, and it's tough with the shotgun. You're just taking that rapid shot. It's not like a well-aimed, placed shot. Yeah. So, for a second he's sort of running in circles, and then I took another shot, put him down. But during that time, what he did was basically cried. Like, and that's like the defense of a rabbit. Yeah.
And the dinner bell, though.
Yeah. Makes a sound that calls things from everywhere to come eat it. Yeah. So anyway, you just look at him, you're like, okay, this guy's job is to run away from stuff, not to stand and fight, not even to like climb a tree, just going to run circles till you catch it.
Yeah. The camo was pretty good. Like they did kind of disappear quickly.
We should hit on that the snowshoe hare does turn white for the winter and turns back to brown.
But it's not a pure white. It's this sort of, like looking at it from a distance that you really wouldn't, I don't even know that you'd notice it if it stood still. It would just kind of blend into everything. So they were really, looked like grass and snow kind of mixed together.
Because he still has like a brown undercoat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I imagine all of those white hairs fall out and leave behind the brown that's underneath.
Makes sense. Yeah.
But so it is, because pure white would be less effective of a camo in that environment than having that brown undercoat. He sort of blends in. They were saying sometimes, though, you get these like late season snows. So he's already turned white and he's running against a fallen leaf duff layer floor, and he's real easy to see.
I'm sure there's a period on either end, that he's not doing too well. Yeah.
But I don't know what you were just about to say before we jumped into the camo. But
the last dish that we were talking about. We did the rabbit loins, which is always the most tender part of a rabbit. Something that I normally like to do with the farmed rabbits, or leave the belly attached, take it off the bone, and then roll the loin inside the belly. So there's a kind of for lack of a better term, a fatty covering. Yeah.
So the belly meat, like the paunch meat, would stay attached to the loin.
Correct.
So on the southern part of the loin there, the belly side, of course, you've got that big flap. So that allows you to pack something in there and roll that in if you want.
So we did the same thing, except for these, the belly wasn't really even enough. And I didn't know if it was going to end up like cooking out correctly. Yeah. Could be tougher, just who knows. So I opted to just separate the loins out and actually like kind of glue them together, lay them on a flat sheet of prosciutto, add some of the walnuts that we did, which actually I thought ended up being my favorite part of the dish.
The black walnuts.
Yeah, they're really, really good.
And we shelled out fresh ones so that they were really,
and I think that made a difference
really
too.
Nice. Like the oil contents were super fresh.
Yep. And that went in there with a little bit of sage and some maitake mushrooms and some shaved bread pieces, just to kind of suck all the juices up and keep it inside. Then we rolled that up, tied it, seared it, sliced it.
So that was cool because you trussed that whole thing out.
Yeah.
And then you Did you bake it? Yeah,
I finished it in the oven.
Finished it in the oven.
Crisped up the outside a little bit, and
you
then
started
just let it cook through.
By searing it the outsides and then put it in the oven.
And honestly, I was expecting again, like maybe a noticeably more tough, version of what I'd done before. But honestly, it was pretty darn tender. I was surprised.
And it's cool looking because you cut it into slices, and in the slice, that cross section, you see all the parts.
Yep.
With the stuffing in there and everything.
And then we made a little brown butter with the some more of those walnuts over the top, and I think they were just super yummy. I was impressed.
Yeah.
My dad has a big tree, at his house, huge, a couple 100 years old, and we have mountains of these things, and all we ever did with them was throw them at each other. So right. I don't. And maybe some furniture polish for when you scratch. You get a scratch in some furniture, you rub it right on there. Yeah. But I've got a whole different. Look on it now.
The nutcracker that I have for them is pretty outrageous.
Oh, you're going to need it. Yeah. There was no doing that.
There's a couple other styles too I've seen of these black walnut nutcrackers. It's similar. I told you, because I had those macadamia nuts in Hawaii. I thought I would just crack those between two river cobbles. Yeah. And it was, well, not that there's river cobbles in Hawaii because it's all volcanic rock, but the hotel we were at had imported all of these river cobbles for their landscaping. Right. So I stole a couple, brought it back to my room. And I'm just banging.
They're shooting around.
They're shooting off, yeah. And I was like, I'm going to need my black. Actually, before that, I was like, can I crack one of these in my teeth?
Oh, my God. That's a bad idea.
I know, but I've been my whole life doing that.
Yeah, me too. It's still a bad idea, though.
My dentist describes my teeth as hunter-gatherer, too. But anyway, that didn't work. And then the rocks didn't work. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to have to bring these home and use that nutcracker. But same with the black walnuts. I mean, you'd need a hammer, or something. And
even then, you would just obliterate it.
Yeah. And if you don't obliterate it properly, you can't really get the nut meats out.
It's not usable at that point. Yeah. So
it would be a mistake to associate them too much with a English walnut.
I mean, you can see why, conventional ag is not, lining up to do this. Yeah. But, I mean, flavor-wise, I was really impressed.
Yeah, it's amazing how well they lend themselves to cooking, and then also
the cooking helped
to sweet dishes too. So.
Yeah, I mean the cooking kind of evened out the rough edges, and then it became I don't know. I really liked it.
Yeah, because Hammond's over the years they've tried many ways to pitch that flavor.
Yeah. It's also hard to describe. What would you even call that?
I call it fruity acetone notes.
Okay.
Which I don't think they liked when I call it acetone because it has obviously some kind of chemical context. But it reminds me of being in northern Thailand in Chiang Mai, and I drank a lychee wine up there that was it felt like it would take nail polish off. That's
really?
Kind of it reminded me of, over the years, having smelled nail polish remover. Yeah. It's got a fruit odor to it.
Yeah.
So that's how.
But in the best way possible, right? This is
not
just
in a negative way, but it's a little diabetic breath.
Yeah,
there's
it has its own fruity
thing, chemical alcohol kind of note to it. But they describe it at Hammond's as bold, wild flavor. That's their pitch for it. And so, but it's just not something that,
which is pretty subjective, right? I feel like you could, take a lot away from that. Yeah.
So, anyway, obviously it's not a nut that consumers are used to. I mean, first of all, you can't throw it in the Christmas dish with the Brazil nuts and the walnuts and the hazelnuts or whatever. It's too hard of a nut to get into, and then it doesn't evenly come out of the shell the way you would
Yeah, you're getting pieces, not halves or holes.
And there's a lot of loss, as you saw. We cracked the shells. There's a lot you can't get out. You need a pick.
Yep.
And then even if you have a bowl of them,
even with a pick, it was hard.
Yeah. Exactly. They actually were using in the factory there where they process them, they just had pieces of sheet metal they'd sort of cut into triangles and sharpened up the edge of to make little picks, which was interesting because we were using those lobster picks.
Yeah, I mean that was pretty close.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point is eating a bowl of black walnuts, not maybe the most exciting nut to eat that way, but then when you cook with it, there's a complexity to the flavor that most nuts don't have.
Yeah, there's a lot more going on.
Way more.
And again, it's hard to I'm not really sure how to describe it because fresh when we ate them, that grassy acetone sort of fruitiness. I don't know what vegetal, whatever you want to call it. That's pretty easy to spot, but that kind of goes away a little bit once you cook it, and it becomes a little more savory.
Yep.
I don't even
and then you have the nice texture too.
The texture was great. It was really nice.
When I first launched the protein powder, obviously we got mostly positive feedback, but you get the people, the haters, who are out there having a bad day or whatever. and they write stuff like, "Why would you do this with protein powder? Just eat the nuts." It's like, okay, how many black walnuts have you eaten this last decade?
Right.
You know?
Right.
Here's some. Like, let's see how much you want to eat. Because I'm putting a third of a cup into my smoothie every morning, and I'm eating a ton of this wild food that's, you know, being gathered by foragers around the country. Like, it's in my diet for real.
To replicate that, it would take you weeks.
Yeah, and I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't eat them that way.
Yeah.
But I'll eat them this way. So to me, it's like it's like a win-win, because here's this food crop that's not getting utilized otherwise. You know, so it gives us the chance to actually like subsist on it.
Well, and I didn't realize that it was purely a forage-based operation.
Pretty neat, right?
They don't need any water, no tractors, no nothing.
What's like that?
I don't think I don't know of anything else.
Not many things, man. You think about the sort of it's interesting in the current political climate, because, you know, everything is getting hated on. Agriculture, of course, getting hated on. Water usage, pesticide usage, all that, of course. But then also even labor. So the idea that there's like a volunteer labor force.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm hitting those ESG scores, baby.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great business model.
They're awesome people too at Hammond's.
Are they?
Yeah, they really are, and they do a lot for their community out there. So it's really cool, because it's a very small town, and the town's kind of dominated by their facility.
Okay.
Because you see those silos that they store them in from the whole town. I guess they had a big tornado that came through there 10, 12 years ago or something, and just ripped the town apart. And Hammond's was big and involved in like rebuilding the town, and they're like probably the biggest employer there. And so everybody knows them, and all the stores carry the black walnut ice cream and all this kind of stuff. They got a little gift shop downtown that Hammond's runs. It's a really cool operation.
It's a smart operation.
Yeah, I'm happy to be teamed up with those guys. But I wish there was more we could do like that with Wild Foods, because a lot of people think it's impossible, and then you got people like Sam Thayer, who we're going to feature this season in one of our episodes, but he's like, look, man, like nature is what's feeding people now. So the idea that he says you can have nature and eat it too. You know, so it'd be neat to like see what to what degree which wild foods could fill. Because obviously most wild foods can't do that, where you're like feeding a significant amount of the American population on them. But there are some that can, and so it'd be neat to see some of them brought to the forefront.
Well, I mean, you could get into invasives there, right?
Absolutely.
You know, if you're just talking about pure protein, there's probably more protein in wild boar in, you know, one southern state than anyone ever would imagine. I mean, it's truly a staggering amount. Very hard to get it from there to, you know, commercial sale. That's not an easy thing to turn around.
No,
you know, but I think there are those resources out there, but most of them are, for one reason or another, inconvenient.
The axis deer out of Hawaii is an interesting one. When I was in Honolulu airport, I found a venison stick that was made from their axis deer. And when we were in Molokai, they had a program, a USDA program. So what they were doing was they do night hunts. So they're using thermals and, you know, night vision, the whole deal, or just jacklighting or whatever. But it's got to be a head or neck shot. And they'll go out, they'll get 200 animals in a night.
Wow.
I mean, the amount of deer there is just so staggering that it almost defies belief.
Wow.
So they'll go out and do that, and then they fly in a USDA inspector. And the inspector goes through, they make sure that it's head or neck shots. They make sure, you know, that the organs are intact, that they're healthy organs. They go through that whole inspection process. And then they can sell that meat like hogs that have been live trapped. They can sell that meat in. So they've, my friend Desmond set up this whole system with the USDA.
That's fantastic.
Anyway, so now that meat's getting kind of like the way hogs in Texas are starting to make it onto the menu. So that's pretty exciting when you have a wild animal. So you don't have to put all those inputs in, and yet you can actually extract out. So,
no, I mean, I think it's the dream, right?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You know, using what you're currently have no way to utilize. I'd like to see more of that. I mean, I think they're doing that with jellyfish. I don't know if you've heard about this.
Jellyfish?
Jelly balls, they call them.
Man, I would like to eat jellyfish.
They don't taste like anything.
Grant says, told me he ate some in Thailand the other day, and he said the texture was really wild.
So have you ever had like a bad egg roll?
Yeah,
just from like whatever. So then you ate jellyfish.
They're in there.
They're in there. What they say about jellyfish is that if you have 5 pounds of ground meat and you add 5 pounds of jellyfish to it, you have 10 pounds of ground meat.
Wow.
So it just takes on whatever it's in, and it kind of just hides.
Soylent Green there.
Kind of, yeah.
That's cool.
But yeah, a lot of I think there was some shrimp
trawlers. So it's like
trawlers.
An extender of a protein dish.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think there was shrimpers or something that were catching so many of them in their nets, and they're like, what do we do? And one guy, I think he's in South Georgia. Anyway, he set up this whole thing. He's, ships it back to, I think they go to China, if I'm not mistaken. But that's another one of those, strange things that is, I guess because maybe oceans are getting a little warmer. We've had kind of a,
like a bloom.
For, I don't know, past like 5 years maybe. And so some of these guys are keying in on them, and, I think that's kind of what we have to do is, know when we've got too much of one thing, figure out how to utilize it, get it to market.
Man, we need to talk to the World Economic Forum about extending our meat with jellyfish before we start looking at getting it out of our diet.
Yeah. And I think that's a little short-sighted just to say that protein is evil and vegetables are great. I mean, it's just not true.
That thing you were talking about the other day, the survey, like what's your footprint like or whatever. It's like, well, how many days a week do you eat meat? That's like the only question, like no distinctions, no subtlety, no nuance.
And nothing to say, okay, what are you doing that is good?
Yeah.
Like we do a lot of, we try and do as much as we can as far as, providing our own food without having to go out and get it from, someone who spent a lot of fuel to get it there.
Yeah.
A lot of composting, a lot of, all the stuff, chickens, the whole 9 yards. But anytime you farm, land, you have to prepare that land. So you're taking it back to almost zero. Not only are you killing life above ground, but you're killing all the, the microbes that are in the soil. And I think that plays a much bigger role than anyone really understands. Once that's gone, that's really hard to get back. So,
you're saying like the idea that we're just going to live on plant food and that's not going to have any negative impacts.
Well, without animals, right? So when you have cows grazing, you have a system that's putting in, taking out, and those microbes are there. They're doing their job. They're remaining intact. You're not disturbing the soil. When you disturb the soil, you're losing a lot of life.
Yep.
And that life breaks down nutrients that are much more bioavailable to plants. And I'm not a botanist or anything, but this is my chef's understanding of this.
Right.
So, it's one of those things that there's some vilification of something that's like arguably maybe less, in my mind, definitely less damaging than something like a regenerative cattle farm.
Yeah. Now, in fairness, obviously, most Americans don't get their food from a regenerative farm.
That's true, but there's more and more and more.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But this is backlash against CAFOs.
Yes.
But then what's interesting is they're like, well, everybody needs to eat plant foods. And it's like, well, it's the CAFO equivalent in the plant kingdom when you have these massive corn monocrops or massive wheat monocrops. And that you somehow think is better than having...
Well, and it's a petrol-based fertilizer for most of that. It's not great.
It's not great.
It's not great.
But wheat and corn don't fart, Tony.
That's true.
That's true. Fart. Yeah, I know. I mean, they're lacking nuance.
I agree.
For sure.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the insect argument, as somebody who eats insects, because one of the things that's happened to me over the years is people are like people are getting against the consumption of insects because... there's like a push to get them off of meat, and people are seeing that happen. So they I don't want anything to do with that. And I'm like, well, but insects can be fun.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
No, I don't either. But the idea that you're going to be forced to live that way was kind of off-putting. But what's neat about it conceptually is my understanding of it's like this: city-states can never provide their needs from inside the walls of the city-state, so they must take it from the outside lands. And in order to do that, they've always had to subjugate the peoples who live on those lands to provide the food for the city-state.
Sure.
And the people who live at the top of that pyramid in the city-state have the most luxurious lifestyles, therefore need the most resources, which means they got to reach out further and further into the land base to supply the stuff. And so if you're going to feed all those people in the city, which... Again, it's always funny to have the people in the city give you a hard time when you live in the country about your lifestyle. But all of that protein has to come out from outside there, and that takes a huge land base. So it's possible to have some number of skyscraper type buildings that are insect producing inside a city. That conceptually is the only way I've ever. I mean, I guess unless you could somehow grow algae or something, but it's the only way I can think of where you can actually produce enough protein for that city inside the city's footprint.
I mean, you can do some vertical gardening stuff, but that kind of runs out eventually.
Yeah, eventually. So, but anyway, it's just interesting conceptually, but the idea that people are just going to peaceably like transition over to something like that. It's like ridiculous.
I mean, it's going to be hard to give up, hamburgers for crickets.
Been seeing some of the printed meats. Have you seen those?
Yeah,
I'm sure you've seen
that
those
bothers
pictures.
me more, actually.
It's disgusting.
That bothers me more. We're spending a lot of time and energy creating something that already exists in a much more, clean and natural way. And, it's not like that stuff grows on a plant.
No, like 75 ingredients.
There's a lot going on to get it there, and I don't think people think about those steps very much.
The Impossible kind of meat story, though, or Beyond Burger and all of that, seems like it's been a pretty big epic fail.
Has it? I don't really.
Yeah, I actually
know.
saw an article. I don't remember which publication, like one of the mainstream newsstand publications, and it was like Beyond Burger or something like that. And it was basically like about how all of that's turned out to be a food fad. We did see them offering Impossible Burger on our flights from Honolulu to Maine or to New York. And but I got the impression it was like a last-ditch effort because remember McDonald's and Burger King, everybody was like taking it on, and they've all kind of dropped it. It's like not selling.
Yeah, I do remember what it was about a year or so ago. We heard a lot about it, and then kind of not
If
much.
you're somebody who eats at Burger King, as if you're going to order a fake burger there when you're already somebody who's like, I'm not too worried about what I eat.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And you probably want the Whopper, like the idea that you want the Impossible Whopper.
It seems odd.
It's like the wrong demographic to pitch that to.
No, I
it makes
agree.
way more sense at like a Whole Foods or something, but it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's not like your vegans are lining up to go to Burger King.
That's true. And
the idea of getting non-vegans to want to eat that stuff?
I don't think that's going to happen.
Doesn't seem very likely.
I doubt it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can only speak for myself, obviously, but it doesn't seem like, there's just nothing motivating me to go try that. It's just, I can't think of a good reason. So.
Oh man, I was drinking oat milk, and you were the one who was like, "What are you doing?"
Well, so it's kind of funny. So I've been through this conversation a couple of times, like in my own home, and it's just one of those things that it takes a lot to get it there. And I think certain companies probably do a great job. No disparagement whatsoever. But how do you know? I just don't know.
And the ingredient deck, again, it's 25 ingredients versus like one ingredient, milk.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it's a flavor thing. I'm used to something, and I'm used to the way that it behaves when I'm cooking with it or whatever. So, coming up with a new replacement when the replacement is, or the original is better, I just don't really get it. So,
I don't know how we even got there. I make my smoothies with chaga tea.
Yeah.
And we had some oat milk around once, and I was like, oh, that'll thicken it a little bit. That'll be fun. And then before I know it, I'm like using it regularly. But anyway, I've since switched actually to yogurt.
Okay. All right. Well, that's great.
High protein, high fat.
You got some culture.
Get some culture, yeah.
That's
But
great.
so anyway, thanks for giving me shit. Sometimes you just find yourself in some kind of like awkward scenario. You're like, wait, how did I get here?
Yeah, no, I understand completely. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other things that, if you've got dairy issues or whatever, then like absolutely. But it seems like it was a mass shift away from milk to something that is the poor man's version of milk, but somehow more expensive.
More expensive.
So,
more bougie too. It's that whole thing, and it's like, the pretensions around food have gotten pretty bad. I know that's always been there. I've had the opportunity to interview a bunch of folks who study food history, and one of the pieces that's always been there is the hierarchical nature of diets and how people demonstrate their status through what they do or do not, and particularly what they don't eat.
Yeah,
seems like so. I know that's always been a component. So today, if you eat that bougie stuff, it's like it's a status thing, which makes sense because humans do that. But it's funny how that kind of a low quality food has been elevated to a high status food.
Yeah. Well, and just processing in general.
Yeah.
Like processing has become the way to go. And what it used to be was preservation. Now it's processing.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting, like an interesting to think about. You know, for the longest time, humans had to figure out how to, save that food to get them through winter. And, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Well, through most of everything today was born from preservation.
Right.
And the culinary world. Now, with everything being processed and easily preserved with chemicals and stuff like that, you're getting into another level. Don't get me wrong. I really enjoy junk food from time to time. I'm not hating on it, but I think we've shifted in one direction only. And that pendulum needs to kind of swing back a little bit.
I would like to. So when I travel, I typically go to like I'm more drawn to go to South America or Asia than I am to go to Europe because my interests lie less in visiting the kind of cultural iconic places, and I'm more interested in, well, I think Chris said it last night. He said, or one of our camera guys was talking about, he said his wife is more interested in, I think, culture, and he's more interested in landscapes or something like that.
I think that was exactly.
And I have that kind of same thing. Like I'm not interested in like an architectural tour. I mean, if I'm there, it's happening.
Certainly
very
appreciate it
to me. Yeah, I totally appreciate it. But I'm drawn to landscapes, and
me too.
Which means I haven't traveled very much in Europe. And one thing I think that I would like to see there, and maybe you have a good sense of it from your time in Italy, I would love to see how other cultures who have a deeper connection to food are responding to some of these modern things. Because I imagine, America tends to be this place where we embrace radical changes really fast, and we even pioneer them. But I'd be curious to see how things like Beyond Burger and oat milk are received in Italy versus here.
When I was there, which was, a while ago, that stuff wasn't around yet. There are some differences. Italy is an amazing country. It's sort of an anomaly. It's a thin strip going north to south, surrounded by water with mountains kind of scattered throughout the whole thing. So it's a very unique ecosystem. Stuff can grow there like nowhere else. Fig trees that grow out of the cracks in the brick.
Amazing.
Citrus trees on ski slopes. It's just a weird. It's a weird thing. There's like 3.5 feet of volcanic topsoil. So it's got a lot of basalt and all these kind of minerals and stuff. So they're just, it's a unreplicable kind of agricultural environment. But they produce an incredible amount of food, of really high quality food as well. A mix of both, organic and non-organic or natural. But for the most part, like they are obsessed with food. They live to eat. And I mean that in the best way possible. They do an amazing job of it. So everything revolves around dinner with the family, like eating with the family. And, there's, a lot of people will raise 2 pigs a year just to put up their own prosciutto and stuff. So and that's common. It's not like
it's
thing.
About having a higher food standard as much as they never lowered their food standards.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah. I mean, it was always great. Don't get me wrong. They were always doing a fabulous job, but their quality of the original product is hard to beat. As far as how they're handling the new stuff, I don't know. I don't know. They do like their technology over there, believe it or not. Like the kitchen that we had a ton of these fancy, contraptions that like we don't ever see over here. Like I've worked at a lot of really bare bones kitchens in the States.
Making foams and stuff, or like
no, but like a $10,000 microwave. There was like 2 of them, and like it never got used. Blast chillers and beautiful equipment, and they have good stuff.
Hey, on that topic, you were telling me the other day about a freezer that sounded like a fairly affordable cold freezer.
Yeah, I forgot the name of it specifically, but I think it's down to -40 or -60. So it's what I keep fish in when I have to freeze like tuna or blocks or whatever. And for storing fish, it goes a long way to extending the life of that and actually having it be, pretty darn close to
keep a little
perfect.
more color too. And
way more color. Yeah.
I would like to get some. And you said it. This
I'll
was
send you the link.
In the kind of price range though of a regular chest freezer.
$370, $400.
Yeah, a little more than a chest freezer, but not much.
And it's not huge, but I mean, it works really well.
And that sounds fantastic. I'd love to have one freezer that's real cold like that. I made the mistake, and I've since learned, if you bring a refrigerator freezer down too cold, and it's got one of those systems for like a water filter in there. You can basically freeze the pipes, and then you end up with leaks. And we've got some water damage to our floor upstairs because I was running my freezer up there at -6.
There you go.
Because I could get it colder than my chest freezers.
Sure.
And so I put stuff in there at -6. I mean, that's pretty. I'm always like, it's surprising, but not everybody understands that below freezing, there's a huge gradient of how cold the things are.
Huge, yeah.
And how slow. And also that enzymatic processes don't end because something's frozen. So I mean, the colder you can get, the more stasis you get.
It changes. If you're gonna freeze a piece of fish like at standard temperatures, if you did it for 5 days, that's really you're gonna have something that looks pretty darn good. 10 days maybe, yeah. Once you start getting into that month, after about a month, you'll start to see that degrade and degrade and degrade. If you're at -80. that really doesn't happen. You get about a year out of it. So, that's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah, that's a real good way of thinking about it. It's nice when you can freeze fish whole.
Yep.
I find that really, really helps.
Rare, especially for the home fisherman. That's a
I've
tough
got some
one to do.
golden tiles in the freezer there that I froze solid.
That's cool.
That's good eating fish.
So you took the guts out first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Got them, but then try to like close up and the edges of that cavity, and then just
vacuum seal.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Vacuum seal them in there. But right now I've got some sea ducks in my freezer, and I just left whole guts in, everything.
Really?
Because my friend up in Newfoundland, she just was always pulling. Our friend Lori, she's always like pulling ptarmigan out of the freezer, and they're just guts in, whole fed. They just drop them in the freezer.
Wow.
And you'd think that something really weird would happen, but it's kind of like Europeans like hanging birds guts in.
Yeah,
it's like,
that's true.
It doesn't really, if you're just gonna like, gut it anyway.
Especially if you don't rupture it. Right?
That's it. Yeah, I mean, you probably wouldn't want to do that if you put a pellet through the guts.
Right.
But like in a pinch, it's not my preferred way. I put those birds in there because I told you that whole fiasco about my boat. That's for another, that's for another day. But basically, after a long hunt, getting trapped out there and not getting home till super late, we had all these birds, and they had to we didn't have time, so it was like into the freezer.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do, man.
Yeah, so we'll see how they come out. But yeah, it's interesting what you said about food preservation. Especially when it comes to like condiments and stuff like that.
Everything is preservation, like beer, right? That was the first way to store grain calories. I mean, like everything you can think of is all based on food preservation.
Yeah.
Confit, right? Like duck confit. That was preservation. And that whole dish revolved out of that. Rendering, fat, storing it, nice and clean so it doesn't go rancid. Like anything you can think of has its pasta, right?
Yeah.
Take all that wheat, grind it, dry it, ready to go, palatable carbs that you can just take whatever protein, make a sauce, and then boom, you're done. So like everything you think of is pretty much done for that reason. Meat grinding, right? Like what is that? We're trying to preserve all of our scraps and all of our little pieces. It's being efficient, and that's kind of all it is.
Yeah.
So if you go farther, if you trace something back enough, you'll get to someone who didn't have a refrigerator.
Yeah.
Pickling, canning, all that stuff, smoking, everything.
It's shocking how recent that was. When you zoom out a human timeline.
Oh yeah, very close.
Spend so much time talking to people about the Pleistocene epoch, or you're talking when you start thinking in the terms of like 10,000, 50,000, 100, 300,000 years, million years. You're like, oh, it was like 2 generations ago.
Yesterday.
No refrigeration.
Yeah.
It's so interesting for kids today who are like, there was internet, there was phones, there was social media.
Yeah.
Like that's a whole another thing is like, you remember phones coming, around and there was still a lot of lag time before we had good internet on our phones. And then,
long time.
And then a lot of lag time before there was social media.
Yeah.
But now there's kids who have grown up and they have had social media the whole time, too. So when you tell them that this stuff didn't exist very long ago, it's like, you remember the things your parents
Shut
used
up,
to say
old man.
to you. Yeah, it's so annoying to hear that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you walked to school barefoot in the snow?
Right.
Yeah, okay. Uphill
both directions.
ways.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, I know I sound like that. Like, social media is brand new, kid. You don't understand.
Well, and I don't think we do. I don't think we understand how social media is affecting us long term.
How's it affected the food, culinary, like especially for chefs and stuff?
I think it's good and bad. Just like any change, there's going to be ups and downs. I like, it's for me. I get to see a lot of chefs work up close and personal, and if you, just like there's TV that can help you learn stuff. I mean, it's not all bad. I get access to a lot of...
You get your Salt Bays out there, though.
Sure, you do. And then you have your Josh Nylands, and he's been blowing it up and doing a fabulous job, and learn a lot from those guys. So there's it's easy access to information, which is great. Some of it's good, some of it's bad.
Man, I'd like to get out and work with Josh. I'm really curious to see his operation up close, and
me too.
And actually just try some of those dishes because.
Well, you got to get your hanging cabinet set up.
Yeah. I've got that refrigerator there, just ready to go.
Just wait.
I had to disassemble it to get it through those doors, and so now I've got to
reassemble
it. But yeah, for the listeners, basically, because aging fish or meat is so easy on a sheet pan with a wire rack.
Yeah.
In a fridge, but it takes up a lot of volume.
It does.
So I'm really looking forward to having.
And there's varying degrees of it. I mean, they're doing it to the nth degree, and basically what's amounts to being a salumi curing cabinet. So it's a refrigerator that you can get really specific with the temperature and the humidity.
Yeah.
So you don't want to, you're drying something, but you're doing it in such a way that it's drying slowly, and that way that the outside doesn't become impermeable, which would actually lock that moisture on the inside, and it wouldn't allow it to escape.
Yeah.
This is a big issue in making salami as well. Okay. Right? Like you'll over dry the outside, and it's like wrapping a raincoat around a wet sponge. It's not going anywhere. Vortex. Yeah. So you get a lot of loss that way. So there's for those who haven't read the book, the secret is essentially dry gutting fish. Like as soon as you rinse it, you're taking all that bacteria that's in there, and you're mixing it into a liquid that then redistributes it everywhere.
Okay. In other words, you got the fish's cavity is full of bacteria. You spray that out, and you spray that bacteria all over. You're
inoculating the rest of it.
Yeah.
That was kind of like, I didn't immediately understand that.
They do not. He's constantly going on about it, but it's like, the way that we take fish and we feel like because they were in the water at one point, it's okay to like get them wet over and over again once they're processed. It's a very strange way to approach meat.
It is.
You certainly don't see anybody dunk a steak in water before they cook it.
No. In fact, they'll hang it for 2 weeks before they even cut it into
But it's
steaks.
so counterintuitive to the average person that if you that fish can sit in a refrigerator on a wire rack, because I'm not doing anything special. This is my regular refrigerator. I'm in and out of it all day. It's not like it's at perfectly temperature maintained, and yet I can take a piece of swordfish, which is kind of a stinky bit of fish if you don't treat it right. Put it on a wire rack. I've let it sit 2 weeks in my refrigerator, just drying forming a rind, drying. You'd think that it would smell, but it actually has none of those fishy.
It's all anaerobic bacteria versus aerobic. As soon as you put a piece of plastic wrap up against something, that's got moisture to it, you're creating that airless, environment for that bad bacteria to breed and take off. So we were kind of doing this, back in the day, we were kind of doing this without realizing what we were doing. It was just like, hey, we got to get a couple extra days out of these whole fish. Let's get them up. Let's get them in the air. Let's get them breathing. And it also helps with crispiness, like skin crispiness. Like you can really get a really great, sear on it.
Sure.
Better texture, all that kind of stuff.
Because that's like the secret with a chicken too. Is like
with everything.
Like I'll spatchcock a chicken, peel the skin up off of the meat, and then put that on the wire rack in the fridge, and it dries out. And then when you roast it, boy, that gets nice and crispy.
That's the secret to everything, right? Like surface area versus. So when you put something in a pan, right? Like if you overcrowd it. What you're doing is you're having less hot pan material, less metal that can actually evaporate that moisture that's coming out, and so you start steaming. And steaming is not good for browning.
Oh, and I watch people I see it with venison all the time. Guys cook at camp, and they'll throw so much meat onto that pan.
And I get it. Sometimes you got to do it, and you're hungry. Like you got a lot of people, and you got a small pan.
But I'm like, no.
Yeah. It does kind of ruin the.
Let's get a bigger pan. Yeah. It's interesting.
Or batches. Do it in batches.
Yeah. What's up real quick? I know we got to get you to the airport here in a minute, but what's up with all the massive volume of water for cooking pasta? Is it just because it stays hotter because when you throw the pasta
so
in?
it's stability. And you don't have to do that, but we had a large amount that we had to cook at one time.
But I always see that recommended, even like if you buy a box of pasta, it says on it like, like 75 quarts of water.
You also want it to be able to move freely so it doesn't stick to itself.
Okay.
And usually you've got to move that stuff around for the first 40 seconds, right? And after that, like it's loose enough that it's not going to grab. But even if like like when we pick it up, right, we boil the pasta, then it goes into the sauce, like into a frying pan with the sauce, and then you finish cooking it in that. And usually that's, depending on how fresh your pasta is, that could be a minute, that could be, 3, could be 10 seconds,
Well, you really made Avani's night, man.
I'm so glad.
It was, she was joking last night, her slogan, I believe in carbs.
Yeah, right.
And so it was like, wait, there's bread and there's crostinis and there's pasta. Yeah. Like she was so stoked. She woke up this morning talking about it.
Oh, good. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, you hit that out of the park.
Good,
man.
good.
Well, we got to get you to the airport. What you got on the horizon? Anything interesting?
Yeah, I'm going out the West Coast and doing a little skiing for a couple days and probably a lot of eating.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I love your method, by the way. Going from restaurant to restaurant is we've been doing it more and more when we'll hit a new city, and And it'll be like, let's go get apps at 4 places instead of, and you feel like you've been there longer when you do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, then you're learning a lot more about, the restaurants.
Yeah.
If you only got one night, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Hey, it's been awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much.
I'm really looking forward to you getting more time out here because
Me too.
I really want to show you today on the drive because so many things happened that we didn't really get to talk about, like running into that massive police roadblock on
oh my God, that
way
was
home
crazy.
the other night. But I was really wanting you to go past this one lake where we tend to accumulate a whole bunch of ice shacks.
Well, we kept driving in at night. And that was the problem.
Yeah, so I'm hoping today on the way to the airport to show you that. But I really want to get you ice fishing.
I do too. I've never done that.
Yeah, you're such an angler. You'll just love it.
It'll be a blast.
There's so many places I want to take you. So anyway,
well, thanks again for having me.
Get back up here, man.
I will.
Right. Thanks for being on the show again.
All right, buddy. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh new content. Have a podcast guest or topic suggestion, or maybe a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host the WildFed TV show for? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. If you still haven't seen season 1 or 2 of the WildFed TV show, go to myoutdoortv.com, grab yourself a free trial subscription, and then check out all 20 episodes. Season 3 of WildFed premieres on Outdoor Channel in early 2023. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out our store for WildFed shirts, hoodies, hats, stickers, and more. WildFed. Food is all around you.